Hello, fellow historians. I'm Andrea Henderson, and for this video, I explored recent doctoral scholarship related to the Battle of Okinawa via the ProQuest Dissertations and Theses Global. I combed through quite a few dissertations related to the Battle of Okinawa, and I tried to focus on how historians interpret identity and lived experience through primary sources, because that is my goal for my own dissertation. I analyzed two dissertations: Courtney Short's 2015 dissertation from University of North Carolina on race and identity in U.S. occupation of Okinawa, and David Obermiller's 2006 dissertation from the University of Iowa on the politics of Okinawan identity during the early occupation. What drew me to these studies is that both are ultimately concerned not just with what happened, but with how meaning was constructed during and after the battle, which closely parallels the direction of my own research interests. Both dissertations are situated in the broader context of war, identity, and of course lived experiences, but they approach these questions slightly differently. Short focuses tightly on the 1945-1946 period and asks how U.S. military officials racially categorized Okinawans and how those assumptions shaped policy. Her central concern is how identity was assigned from above and how American planners decided who Okinawans were before ever setting foot on the island. And Obermiller, by contrast, takes a longer view, examining the decade following the battle and tracing how Okinawan identity became contested terrain among U.S. authorities, Japanese officials, and Okinawans themselves. His project is less about policy design and more about how the lived experience, the political pressure, and the cultural negotiation shaped identity over time. Together, they frame Okinawa not simply as a battlefield, but as a contested, intellectual, and human space, which we still see remnants of that contested part today. One of the strongest elements in both dissertations is their transparency about sources and methods. And while Short focused on racialized assumptions of the occupying force, her work is rooted primarily in archival military and government documentation, civil affairs reports, occupation planning documents, correspondence between officials, and policy memos. Her methodology is a close textual reading of institutional sources, showing how language itself reveals underlying assumptions. And what stands out is that she treats documents not as evidence, not just as evidence of decisions, but as cultural artifacts that show how government thinks. I'll be closely looking at language used in primary sources myself, so that method was particularly interesting. Obermiller's source base is broader and more interdisciplinary. He draws on U.S. archival records, Okinawan prefectural archives, oral interviews, political publications, and cultural materials. Methodologically, his work blends social history and cultural and political analysis. He is explicit, though, about the limitations of memory and retrospective testimony, which I appreciate. Instead of avoiding that complexity, he uses it as part of the argument, showing how memory itself becomes a historical force. And that is extremely relevant to my research. Both dissertations demonstrate that the aftermath of the battle is not only political, but interpretive, that how people describe events, remember them, write about them, and speak about them is itself historical evidence. And so that has strong implications for studying letters, diaries, oral histories, and the language of service members who experienced Okinawa firsthand. For contextualization, I'm also working through the monograph Okinawa, The Last Battle by Appleman, Burns, Googler, and Stevens. According to the preface, these authors were U.S. Army historians who had also participated in the Ryukyu campaign, which included the Battle of Okinawa. Also of interest are some of the first-hand accounts written in memoirs like Marine Robert Leckey's Okinawa and Marine E.B. Sledge's memoir entitled With the Old Breed. Now, this is a clear and prime example of the differences, though, between the scholarly academic work of dissertations and public history. So these are, though, actual accounts, and so they are definitely worth considering. Engaging with these dissertations has deepened both my understanding of Okinawan history and my understanding of historical method, which is something I really need to think through in my coming days, months, and probably years. Thank you for watching.